Warning: the opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not reflect those of the establishment, the man, or any of his affiliates. The views presented are for entertainment purposes only and do not construe advice, neither legal, medical, or metaphysical, nor do they entail the encouragement of the use of substances in jurisdictions where those substances are illegal.
The Crass and the Spurious is a potentially powerful synaptic inducer. If you or your loved ones suffer from automatonitis, human sheep syndrome, socioeconomic induced stupor, or general chuckleheadedness, Crass and the Spurious use may help alleviate most symptoms.
Side effects may include twitching, realization of past follies, catharsis, casting off the yoke of oppressive crypto-fascist cultural models, OBEs, interminable soliloquies to loved ones and friends, synesthesia, dislocation from the time-space continuum, and possible ego death.
Ask your physician or ethnopharmacologist if the Crass and the Spurious is right for you.
Welcome to the second episode of the Crass and the Spurious. In our first episode, we explored the heroic dose and our respective experiences using 5 dried grams of psilocybin mushrooms alone in silent darkness. We also touched briefly on Tibetan chanting and how sound can enhance the psychedelic experience. After recording the episode, we noticed a similarity between our experiences and the events described in the book True Hallucinations by McKenna, as well as the book Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss by Dr. Dennis McKenna. In these books, they describe the experiment at La Chorrera, where Dennis spontaneously erupts into these guttural, vibratory noises. In order to elaborate further on this, I'm going to pass you over to my mate James. Take it away, James.
Thanks, Nick. As you mentioned in our last podcast, we tackled some issues around psilocybin mushrooms and even how their use in ancient Buddhism has recently been cataloged by the journalist or by the scholar researcher Michael Crowley. We're fascinated by that subject. We're also fascinated, as you said, by the experiment at La Chorrera, which the brothers McKenna conducted in 1971 in the Colombian Amazon. The experiment is alchemical. It involves complex physics, I think. Dennis McKenna in his book describing it calls it half magic, half science, and then later admits that it was probably neither. However, it was very compelling, whatever they did. This is what they did, to the best of my understanding. They went in a hut. In this hut, they consumed a fairly large quantity of magic mushrooms. They also consumed harmine from Banisteriopsis coppi or Psychotria viridis, I forget which one of the plants. They consumed a lot of this harmine, which is an MAO inhibitor. They then went on to, at the height of their trip, make a sound. And what Dennis postulated or hypothesized was that this sound would somehow actualize some sort of interdimensional teacher, logos, philosopher's stone. The experiment involved an altar piece with a live mushroom upon it, but there was ceremony and their attempts at mixing that with science. But the thing that's interesting to us is that the catalyst of this entire experience is the sound. The sound that Dennis himself makes in the audiobook version of True Hallucinations. We'll link it in the notes of the podcast. And when you hear this sound, when you're listening to True Hallucinations, it's very similar to this Tibetan chanting. You know, it's metallic, it's grinding, rhythmic, sort of diphonic. And it goes from very low to very high. So very compelling question. We actually had a chance to catch up with Dr. McKenna he was at a Mind Matters conference here in Toronto. We we had a chance to speak with him, and after speaking with him, he referred us to his good friend Alexandre Tannous. So that's what you have for you today in our second episode of the Crass and the Spurious. We asked Dr. McKenna what is the correlation between the sound he made at La Chorrera and Tibetan Buddhist chanting, and then hear what his colleague, who he referred us to, has to say on the subject. So hope it's an exciting show for you. Thanks.
I think that sound is traditionally and very important in altered state situations, shamanic situations. If you look at every tradition in which these plant medicines are used, and even when they're not used, sound is very important for altered states, for sure. And particularly the atonal sounds, the harmonic overtones and all these things that are not the conventional Western equivalent intervals in the octave. And if you go to places like Tiwanaku, for example, or Pisac and Machu Picchu, there are places you can go where clearly it's engineered for acoustic purposes.
The King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid being another example.
The Great Pyramid is another example. Many places where you can stand in a corner and speak very quietly, and somebody hundreds of yards away can hear from you. This is not unintentional, right? And so there's no doubt, and that sound is important. Sound is fundamental. In some sense, we're all made of sound. Everything's made of
the Big Bang.
all of that. Everything is vibration and oscillation. But I'm not an expert on this. The guy you need to talk to is my friend Alexandre Tannous. If you know who he is,
deep dive on his website.
There you go. He is an amazing person, and he's an ethnomusicologist. He does sound meditation sessions.
I saw on his website that there's pictures of the baseline of the human brain, and then this is your brain on bowl. This is your brain on chanting.
So he covers the whole spectrum, from neuroscience to history to physics to actually make
because of him that I chant to my baby in my wife's womb to get your brain lighting up like that.
So you should do an interview with him. In fact, you should invite him to this gig, because he would definitely come. And I'm sort of he has such a deep knowledge of this that I don't even pretend to. But the answer to your question is definitely very important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's fabulous to be here to interact with you.
Avec plaisir.
Très excité. Awesome.
Génial.
So I just hit record if anyone's interested, just to start it going. So it's nice to meet you. We both have watched some of your presentations online and are fascinated by your work.
Thank you.
I don't know what else to say to start. James, do you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, again, to echo Nick's sentiment, thank you very much for joining this. We are fascinated with what we've learned about you so far, and your recommendation from Dr. McKenna. I don't know how you could get a better recommendation than that, so very pleased for this opportunity. Why don't you, we could talk a little bit about what we know about your amazing career, and you're a PhD candidate, ethnomusicology expert. You've traveled extensively to sacred locations around the world and done a deep dive into what those mean to you architecturally and acoustically. But maybe could you give a couple of lines on what you're all about, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
I've been studying music since I was a little kid, and I went to the university and I did 4 different degrees in music. Studied theory, composition, performance, a lot of performing, and studied music education and ethnomusicology, which is a field that studies music as a sociocultural phenomenon. The ultimate goal is to understand human beings by studying culture through music. And my area of specialization was music of West Asia, and later was fusion. And then I became interested in sound, the effects of sound on consciousness. And I started this independent study about 10 years ago, studying the impact of sound on consciousness and the psyche through three different perspectives: the shamanic societal beliefs, Eastern philosophies, and the Western scientific, and academic side.
Yeah, so through the Greeks and Pythagorean sort of mathematical takes on acoustics.
And also acoustics and mathematics and neuroscience. Basically, sound is such a complex subject that you must take a multidisciplinary approach to understand it. Everything, any lens, any filters that we can use to really understand it would be welcome. From music theory to ethnomusicology, neuroscience, biochemistry, phenomenology, acoustics, and mathematics, and psychology, list goes on and on. So this is where the magic started unfolding when I really try to understand sound by looking at it from different sides and zoom in, zoom out, and find the connecting dots. Yeah.
It seems like there's an effect from the micro to the macro that sound has, from the quantum level on through, that affects just everything in our lives. I was fascinated about in your talk about the EEGs and how the different sounds would alter your brain waves. That was a really interesting thing, especially like the how the Tibetan the Tibetan bowl would like dial it down to a certain level, and then the other ones would spike it up in certain ways. That's almost reminiscent of the sound waves themselves. What it would do. Anyway, James and I would like to talk to you about the experiment at La Chorerra. And James, I'll let you take it from here. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't need to give you much background information because this is something that's central, I think, to all of our senses, that there is a mystery in this world, and one of the teams of individuals who has taken that mystery to the furthest has to be the McKenna brothers. So I would just like I'll paraphrase that question to you, and we can just kick that around for a few minutes and see where it takes us. But in 1971, the brothers McKenna, along with a few of their friends, ventured to the Amazon rainforest in search of ukuhe, which is an orally active form of DMT. They had read about it in Schultes' papers on botany and also in William Burroughs' Yage Letters book. They made their way up the Amazon till they got to La Chorrera, and initially we're going to look into doing just this ukuhe, orally active DMT Varrola resin sap experiment. But when they got there, they found zebu cattle, Brahman's favorite cows, and of course, accompanying Brahma's favorite cows are psilocybin mushrooms. They got into, this is where it gets into the realm of the alchemical and the mercurial. It's pretty hard to define, but we'll take a stab at it. Due to increasingly bizarre circumstances that they were encountering, the McKenna brothers and their group, they decided that there was some major moment of temporal impact in their near future, and that they were it was incumbent upon them to devise some sort of experiment to amenitize or to catalyze this. The experiment that they settled on was fairly esoteric, but here's my understanding of it. You grab some harmine-rich, was it Banisteriopsis copy, or anyway, one of the admixture plants from ayahuasca. They made a harmine-rich beverage. They had these harmine-rich smoking materials. They ingested some psilocybin, and the hypothesis was that if the psilocybin molecules would enter your serotonin receptors. The harmine would act as some sort of stabilizing antenna, and then the catalyst, the big red button, they both had to turn keys, and then the big red button that they pushed was Dennis creating this, what he called a hypercarbylation inducing tone. Now, when we listen to that tone, which is available on the audiobooks version of True Hallucinations, that tone sounds remarkably similar to what Tibetan monks are doing to get to their brainwave change states. And they're certainly talking about great bodies of knowledge that are transmitted from on high. And that seems to be what occurred to Dennis when he made this very specific sound with these very specific psychedelic transducer enhancers, whatever you'd like to call them. And when he made this sound, he experienced a break from regular reality and experienced a shamanic sort of death and a smearing of himself all across the cosmos, which over a period of 2 weeks after that instant, he sort of managed to gravitate back toward the regular world with the help of his brother. So that's, as far as I know, that's the experiment at La Chorrera. It invoked some sort of logos or teaching voice that inhabited the heads of these two brothers and seemed to dispense from them knowledge from up on high, conveyed to most certainly Dennis the idea that that I've heard you echo in your talks, that consciousness might not be something that's primarily materialized from the brain, but rather something that you can tap into, that permeates the universe. So yeah, my question specifically is, you've had a good chance to listen to these Tibetan dudes chanting in their acoustically charged environments. Do you believe that the brothers McKenna stumbled onto some analog of what these tantric Buddhists are doing very formally in a Tibetan setting?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so too. But riff on that, please.
Yes, absolutely. And Dennis and I discussed this numerous times. It's a fascinating experience.
Wonderful.
And so basically, there's a lot that one can say about it. Yeah, I listened also to the audiobook version of True Hallucinations. And it's much more entertaining hearing parents reading it, and the sing. Also, remember the songs that are played, and these are Terrence's songs. He's written them and singing, and also Dennis's voice, doing these sounds as well. So,
you can confirm that was Dennis who did it?
I'm pretty sure that's him.
I'm pretty sure, but I didn't. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure too. I can't remember whether he told me this or I feel that that's him. So, but yes, it sounds like what is called, Tibetan Buddhist chants, this guttural way of producing these chants. Exactly. Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are various ways of doing this diaphonic singing. Diaphonic literally means singing two tones at the same time. Could be low in the throat, or could be a little higher, and it's used in various countries and cultures in Central Asia, in Tibet, Nepal, around the Himalayas, in Mongolia, in Tuva. Here I'm going to demonstrate one version, a different version than what you just demonstrated. But I'll talk a bit about the mechanics so that one understands what's happening. So basically, let's first talk about overtones. And that's going to be a bit long of an explanation. I'm going to keep it succinct because it's a very, very complex thing. And this is basically what it's about. It's about overtones. So overtones are frequencies that are found in any sound that we hear, any sound. Most of the time, we don't hear them directly unless we're listening to gongs, Himalayan singing bowls, didgeridoos, overtone singing, discs, bells. So mostly when we play instruments made out of metal, but sometimes we can produce them on instruments made from plant material or produced by the voice. The overtones are in any sound that we hear because they're the ones responsible for giving the sound its own tone color or timbre, which would allow us to differentiate a sound of a flute from sound of a clarinet or violin, ukulele, and so on. Even if we don't know what that instrument is, we know that this is different from that. Why? Because these pixels, almost like these frequencies that are embedded within the tone, very often the fundamental frequency, the most pronounced part of the tone, the note that gives the tone its name and frequency, overshadows these overtones. But even when we don't hear them, they're still there. If you were to do spectrum analysis, you'll see that they're there. You can use Adobe Audition as a software, or
Right, in the
even
waveform.
better, right, the Isotope RX, and you can see them. Now, if you do spectrum analysis on a gong or Himalayan singing bowl, you'll see that they're there, but in a much more pronounced way, and you can play them individually or in combination. So there's really a tremendous amount of complexity to these overtones. Why? Because they give the natural ratio, the harmonic series that nature gave us. It's almost like the blueprint for sound. So this series is always the same, whether you're starting the fundamental frequency on C, C sharp, D, F, any note. The series will always be the same, and it's the following. Let's say this is your fundamental frequency, C, and the first overtone will be an octave higher from it, 8 notes apart, or 12 half steps apart in the Western world. And then the next overtone will be a fifth higher from this C. So you have C, first overtone C, and then a G, fifth higher, and then another C, 2 octaves higher from the fundamental frequency, and then an E, G, B flat, and so on. So the intervals start to shrink. They start with an octave to a fifth, fourth, and so on, and they go into infinity. We get the tone color, the timbre, based on how many of these overtones are found in one particular tone color, and to what level of strength and weakness these overtones are found. Let's say in my voice, that would create a different tone color, overall tone color that would be different than Nick, your voice, Nick, and your voice, James.
So when you say a tone color, that's almost a sort of a synesthetic description.
Yeah,
of
sound has a color.
The feeling of the letter A, or sorry, the tone A or C or whatever it may be.
More or less, yeah.
Great.
So synesthesia is very complex. Synesthesia is the crossing of senses. It's when people hear something, hear a sound, and they see visuals. 1 in every 10 people is a natural synesthete.
I would say 10 in 10 people are natural synesthesics because of music, because of your love of music. And you can,
absolutely.
I mean, just saying that it's maybe 1 in 10 is an athlete, but we all have those muscles.
We all have them, and we all become synesthetes when we listen deeply, intently to music with eyes closed, or when we take plant teachers, especially when combined with music. So synesthesia can come in different forms. So the tone color is what would allow us to differentiate a C played on a violin from a C played on a flute.
Thank you. Great definition.
Because it hits specific different harmonic overtones, or like the different octaves and keys, like you say, different combinations means that this is a flute versus this is a piano.
Yes.
Is that
exactly
what you're saying? Okay.
Precisely.
Thank you.
So this harmonic overtone series, I won't be able to tell you everything about it, otherwise I'll be talking until spring. So, but I highly encourage people to read the Wikipedia page and to see some videos or to read some stuff. You have to be careful. There are a lot of unconfirmed rumors and hooey and hokey stuff about sound on the internet. So basically, it's very complex ratios, and sound is mathematical ratios that we're listening to. But most importantly, these harmonic overtones, it's called the harmonic series, overtone series, sometimes harmonic overtone series. These notes have very different tuning than the equal temperament that we use in the West. The octave in the West became equal tempered. That means divided into 12 equidistant half steps. To give you more detail about it, the octave is equal to 1200 cents. A cent is a unit for logarithmic measurement. So 1200 cents and 12 half steps, if we are dealing with equal temperament, that means each half step will be equal to 100 cents. And so they're all equidistant. But in fact, when you look at the tuning of the harmonic series notes, you find that the notes in the series all fluctuate. They're all plus minus few cents to many cents, except for the fundamental frequency and every time it repeats in the series. So all of the notes are different than, let's say, checking the tuning of the notes on an equal tempered piano. So we're dealing now with a quantized octave. The mathematics are different. Therefore, there is no transcendental state from listening to sound. We don't vibrate sympathetically anymore. Whereas Indian classical music, non-Western music, they did not adopt the equal temperament because it takes away the state of trance, the transcendental state, the euphoric state. These are very important in Arabic music, classical Arabic music. There's a state that is called tarab, T-A-R-A-B, which is high levels of euphoria, of ecstasy, of enchantment achieved through judicious, attentive musical listening and playing. It's called bhava and rasa in Indian classical music. So sound can allow you to journey, but you need to know how to listen to it. We don't actually, the magic is in how to listen to it. And that's something we know very little about in the West because, we listen to music while doing other things. We rarely sit down and just listen to music. So we lost that practice. So when you listen to harmonic overtones, you're listening to notes, to frequencies with their natural tuning, just intonation, that's what they're called. You're listening to just intonation that would allow your body to vibrate sympathetically, and therefore meditative state, transcendental state, psychedelic state is likely to happen because you're dealing with raw sound, natural sound, not adjusted, castrated. There's a great book about the equal temperament. It's called How the Equal Temperament Ruined Music and Why You Should Care About It.
Are the Renaissance, or sorry, the Gothic cathedrals spaces where Western music hadn't sort of degraded to that point yet, or is it pre-degradation that they were building those?
Pre-degradation. As a matter of fact, every time we sing in non-equal temperament. Every time we play fretless instruments, violins, violas, cellos, basses, we play in non-equal temperament, even though, let's say, the musician has been trained for many years in the conservatory, we still naturally produce the non-equal temperate scale because it's encoded in us.
Noted.
And even playing brass instruments or woodwind instruments, we underblow, overblow to produce the right. So unless we're playing instruments with keys like harpsichords, organs, pianos, instruments with frets, bass guitars, then we have no choice but to play in equal temperament.
Okay.
So now that we talked a bit about this, we can explain the overtone, the diaphonic singing.
Please.
Yeah. So in overtone singing, the way they're generating these tones basically is by adjusting the size of the buccal cavity, the space inside the mouth, counting from the throat all the way to the tip of the teeth. So you can widen or close a little bit the space by moving the tongue up and down to produce a buccal cavity in the same size that would resonate with specific harmonic overtone in the note that you're singing to amplify it, to get a natural amplification. And that's something that's called Helmholtz resonance in physics. Helmholtz.
Got it.
Yeah. So here, I'm going to give an example.
Please.
I'm going to sing fundamental frequency, which is this is going to be most pronounced note, but by manipulating the buccal cavity, I'm going to bring out the various overtones that are in my voice singing this fundamental frequency. Okay? And I'll do so by moving my tongue. to open and close the buccal cavity. So it sounds like this.
Wow.
Wow.
So
That's
you're
awesome.
the one tone that you create at the beginning is I mean, the human voice is really a highly complex instrument, and you're playing all of those notes simultaneously just in talking, but then you went and isolated all the component sounds. Is that what? That's
I
beautiful.
isolated two things basically. So if I sing, oh, you're not going to be able to hear the overtones. You just hear the fundamental frequency. But by manipulating the buccal cavity, you can bring out specific overtones by matching the cubical space inside the mouth with that frequency to get a natural amplification. And then all of a sudden, the overtone, one overtone at a time, that's in that fundamental frequency will be brought to light to
And
your
that's purely grounded in mathematics. I mean, you could do a measurement of the cubic
acoustics.
centimeters that you're
Absolutely.
exposing in your mouth, and that would
It's
correspond.
all physics. It's all acoustics.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, and that's what they do now. When they do this, Tibetan singing monks, they're creating so many changes in the body. First of all, just even though I did it for a few seconds, I'm already in an altered state. It puts you right away in a transcendental state.
Well,
Why?
we both
Because
try to do it for about an hour, or not an hour, but 20 minutes in the morning in the shower at least.
Oh yeah, a great way to meditate. Why? Because it's allowing your body to be exposed to a natural intonation, and it's resonating everywhere in your head, in your jaws, in your neck, your entire body. And the human body is made of somewhere between 70 and 80%
I'll take it one step further. Forgive me to interject, but it may even be affecting the water that's passing around you and going down
That's
into the
true.
drain. If we take
Absolutely.
What's the work of that Japanese scientist that you?
Emoto, though
yeah.
it's controversial, we don't know if this is really something that is repeatable. Some people were not able to repeat it.
Noted.
But anyway,
Sorry to detract. Yes, please go on.
No, that's fine. But water is complex, and it probably has memory, and it has a lot of things that we don't understand yet. And there's definitely a way that sound would be affecting water. So, but going back to the harmonics, so basically you're exposing your body to natural harmonics, and sound travels in liquids 4 times more efficiently than in air. So it's creating an adjustment, a recalibration, and an entrainment in your body, in your brain. But it's also, you're experiencing your sound through bone and tissue conduction as well. That's how we mostly hear our voice, and not just auditorily. The sound coming out of the mouth and going into the ear. You also feel it from the bone and tissue conduction. And this is basically what Om is about. Om is not one frequency. Om should be pronounced Aum. Various vowels. When you do various vowels, you go through the overtones. So, so when they do this, they're causing an altered state to happen. How to navigate in that field and that realm is really hard. When you combine that with plant teachers, compounds, psilocybin or DMT, whatever, something magical must be happening now. Another important thing to address here is that our body is constructed in a way to vibrate sympathetically with natural sound, with these harmonics, with these ratios. Mathematics are the source code of everything, the entire universe. This is why Pythagoras was interested in divisions of strings and harmonics and their connection to sacred geometry, natural mathematical ratios, and so on. But Hameroff discovered that microtubules, which are kind of like conveyor belts inside brain neurons, they basically they move vesicles, granules, organelles like mitochondria and chromosomes via special attachment protein, they vibrate sympathetically with natural sound, with enharmonic tones, that is non-equal tempered scales. So there is a quantum vibration that happens in our neurons, and more likely in the entire body as well. I highly encourage people to read about microtubules. This is a huge discovery in neuroscience. And so we are built to vibrate sympathetically. Now, when we consider that consciousness is not non-local, as more and more of intelligent, open-minded scientists are starting to think of, that consciousness is not made in the brain. The brain is more like a transducing valve, is a transducer of consciousness or receiver of consciousness. And it's more in a morphogenetic field, to quote Rupert Sheldrake. So basically, we're probably changing the transducing effect, getting the mind out of the way, the conditioned mind, and receiving some transmission. So sound is a very effective way to hack consciousness. When you combine plant teachers, compounds, and sound, you get shamanism.
You're putting the pedal through the floor.
Yes. Yeah. Now that's a very interesting way of hacking consciousness, but shamans talk about it, and shamanic societies talk about it in their own language. This is where the shamanic model comes out. Now we take that literally out of context, and we say, oh, well, spirits, and they must be, let's say you drink ayahuasca, you tap into spirits who come and heal you. We don't know if this is real or not. This is what they talk about. Should we interpret it, or should we take it literally? We tend to take it literally. That's a reductionist view. I think we need to try to figure out what are they trying to explain, to talk about with their vocabulary, limited vocabulary. When we introduce our knowledge in Eastern philosophies, Hinduism and Buddhism, the archetypes, these are the gods in Hinduism, neuroscience and physics and mathematics and knowledge of sound, then we may come to a different conclusion. They're all, I think, it's all the Buddhist mind. It's all the mind. It's all these spirits that they're talking about are not necessarily disembodied energies outside of us. They're, archetypes. They're different facets of the self.
Of your obligations to your culture, whatever baggage you're carrying around from your education in early childhood, and how those same bugaboos or those same condensations of emotion resonate with other people who are close to you because they're having the same things. That could take on something. What I hear you saying is that when someone's talking about a shamanic model and they are naked except for a penis sheath sitting in the rainforest, and they're telling you about spirits and all of these things, they're not lying to you, and they're not discussing a version of the cosmos that's incomplete. They're simply using simpler iconography than we've had the luxury of exploring through quantum physics and different,
absolutely,
super colliders, what have you.
Yeah, that's their way of talking about it.
Precisely.
That's their model, and you will see that the model changes from one tribe to another, and everything changes. The Icaros, the ayahuasca songs, the cosmology of spirits, the etiquette of specific ceremonies, the diet, everything changes. There's no agreement on where if we were to reach one field, then everyone will be talking about it. But if they're talking about various things, that means it's open for interpretation.
I agree, but I really like your approach to it, which is to, go out there, have an open mind, experience all this stuff, and then bring it back to the workshop, to the lab, and beat it with the hammers of quantum physics and the clamps of ethnopharmacology and ethnobotany.
Yes, because we're all talking about the same thing.
Agreed. Yeah, we all have the same. Precisely, we all have the same basic instrument, the human body, which we're all using.
Yeah, and we talk about it based on what we know, based on how we're conditioned, based on our model. We are fortunate in the West. We don't have a lot of knowledge on the archaic methods. There is a revival, and
Yes.
many people are interested in that, but we need to be very careful not to take things out of context and to use the lenses that we have, everything, lenses of understanding. We know about sciences, we know about Eastern philosophies, about mystical sects and mystery schools and so many things. Shamanic societies are limited with what they know. They know a lot about plants and about things in their environment, but we need to help them
By affirming with
by
our
affirming.
research what they're doing. I agree.
Yeah,
100%.
doing a comparative study basically, and respect what they say, but not to take literally. This is something that's dangerous. We take it literally, we freeze it, we preserve it out of guilt because we destroyed their cultures,
Yes.
and
Many of them.
many of them, and we're still doing that, with oil companies in the Amazon, and not
Monoculture.
to talk about what Christianity did and bringing disease and and so on. And so there's guilt in that. So the way we manifest this guilt is by extreme devoutness and preservation and respect. We almost make it like a museum piece. This rhetoric, this heritage is a museum piece. You cannot touch it, you cannot interpret it. That's not necessarily good,
I
because
agree wholeheartedly.
shamanism, all of these methods grow. They're always in flux. Nothing is frozen, and they've influenced each other. But also something else to riff on, that how these different religious denominations and religions in the world are killing each other over whose God is more merciful. Sunnite and Shiite and Protestant and Catholics and Muslims and Jews and blah, blah, blah. This has been going for a few thousand years. Shamanic societies do the same. They always bicker and disagree with each other of whose method is better. This is because of belief. We tend to become so attached to what we believe in. So if this is manifesting among shamanic societies, this is telling us something. So it means don't take it too seriously.
Well, I always like Terrence's take on what the shaman was, which is the person who has permission in the culture to go behind the cultural circuit board and look at it all and say, this is all just our best fabrication. So I give myself permission to rewire these cultural narratives in this way. And I think, that's the right way to look at these cultures. I mean, if you have 6 acres of rainforest to live in, and your shamanic culture is telling you that you've got to chop the noggins off 9 of the people who live there, that's going to have, some pretty significant impact on your ability to continue. So the shaman's going to look in there. He's going to say, well, in this particular case, we don't have to do that. He'll say the runes have spoken, and we don't have to kill any people. So I just mean that shamanic cultures, you're absolutely right. If we do them, if we look at them solely in their archaic perspective, we do them a huge disservice, because these are ever-evolving models.
Absolutely.
Astrophysics, quantum physics is an evolving model. If we've learned anything from the advancement of science over the centuries and millennia, it's that we're always wrong to some degree. So this should indicate to us that even our best models are only limitedly better than these incomplete shamanic models.
Right. And how do models grow? By basically acquiring more knowledge.
Hear, hear.
And we always look at something, we try to understand it based on how much we know. But at the same time, we discount how our understanding would be when we know more about various things that would allow us to gain a deeper understanding. Why? Because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what kind of difference it's gonna make.
Thanks, Donald Rumsfeld.
Yeah. Like in the old days, the ancients didn't know about meteorology.
Absolutely not.
There is thunder and lightning. They thought that the gods are angry, and this went on for a few thousand years. We are always capable of conjuring up some explanation or confabulating, because we are interested in understanding. But that's good and bad. It's good because that drives us to deeper and more accurate understanding, but it's bad because we can't really figure out to what extent we're limited based on how little we know, because there's no way to measure how much we know with how much there is still to be known.
Yeah, it says Marshall McLuhan put it. You're driving your society by looking in the rear
look
view
at the
mirror.
rear view mirror, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess my question is, I don't want to, without putting some sort of value statement on Dennis's experience. Was it good? Was it bad? I think we could agree that it was untempered, or novitiate in its approach, and it seems to me that at least some of the effects of the experimental lecturer were somewhat negative, and that Dennis would be probably the first to admit that he experienced some type of what Western medicine would call psychosis.
Yeah.
So that's not my cup of tea. I don't love psychosis, especially for a 2-week period. But I do love transcendental knowledge and tapping into those great sources. And when I did my first heroic dose, at the suggestion of Otios and Oniric, I gravitated to the Heart Sutra, or the Diamond Sutra rather, and the Heart Sutra mantra, like ridiculously. It appealed to me. Those diaphonic sounds pulled me to them with a sense of magnetism that I'd never really felt. And me being an amateur armchair historian, I did a bit of a deep dive into Tantric Buddhism. And what I found was that the Buddhism that when you get Lama Tashi, who was the chant master for the Dalai Lama, singing those chants that we all know because he won a Grammy. Not we all know, but the most often heard Tibetan chanting is this Gyuto monk named Lama Tashi. When we hear that type of sound, where am I going with this? Nick, help me out.
I have no idea where you're going.
All right, I'll keep it up. All right, so I mean.
Well, when we hear, let me interject with one phrase.
Please.
It might not be what you were thinking of. When we listen to such singing, when we listen to overtone singing, if we're in a meditative state, it's drawing attention to the dimension that exists in sound. It's not just one note. It may appear to be one note. Like when you play Himalayan singing bowl, there are multiple notes, overtones coming out. There are several factors that are taking place here, affecting your consciousness. First of all, the vibration, the sound is quieting down the brainwave activities, electrical activities, cycling down through brainwave cycles. It's affecting the vagus nerve. It's affecting the autonomic nervous system. It's affecting the heart rate variability. The vibration, the pulsating vibration is affecting the body and the water in the body. But also, if you know how to navigate, how to use psychonautic skills when listening to that sound, you'll see that it's a dimension. There are many different activities. There are various overtones that have different frequencies, low, mid-range, high frequencies. There are frequencies that have different amplitude, different softness and loudness, dynamics. There's a pulsation to each overtone, a beating or wavering. In physics, it's called modulation. Certain overtones will be beating at wow, 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 wow. Others will be wow, wow, wow. So there's a lot of activity. When you meditate, listening to that, you are being taken into a transcendental state, a state of a world of non-material, and you can lose yourself in it. You become the sound at one point, and then more so, sound can usher you to a place where you don't exist anymore. You're not even hearing sound. It is quite likely that this is really what the samadhi state is in Hinduism, or the satori or kensho state in Zen Buddhism, or the alfana state in Sufism, the dissolving, the dissolution of the ego, losing the self, becoming everything and nothing. Sound takes you there so quickly. This is what I've been researching, and this is what I do when I facilitate the sound meditation. People can look up this stuff on my website, soundmeditation.com. It's very complex and utterly fascinating stuff to talk about, that it can be used as great, powerful tool for altering consciousness in a safe way.
Thank you. Yeah, that's perfect.
I would just like to interject for a sec.
Yeah, please.
just today and yesterday was going through a couple of your SoundCloud files on your site with the I did the Tai Gong meditation and Sensula, I think, and it was, you're like you said, it's very quick. You're starting to just get pulled away by the waves of sound almost. Your consciousness is being dragged outward. And when they're gone, there's also a sense of absence of them. When one ends, you're seeking it with your brain. It's like you're pushing yourself out to find where it went, and then another one starts, and you focus on that. But it's, I don't know, it's almost immediate. Like within
that's
half a
perfect.
minute, I was already going transcendental. Yep.
And like I was saying, it's just, I guess the conclusion of my point is, like, what advice would you have to give to potential, not, I don't want to ask for medical advice, but I mean, what's your take on how to avoid that sort of negative experience, or at least, you know, overly overwhelming break with reality that Dennis had, you know? Like, is there anything that you would suggest when you're, you know, to go on?
Be heedful. Be heedful and set in setting, and be adventurous, but be super careful.
There's something hubristic about calling down the eschaton and demanding that the aliens present themselves, that the McKenna brothers did there, and maybe, like you said, set and setting and heed.
And use sound, absolutely, and go slowly and use sound. Sound is the ultimate tool to ground the self, to get the mind out of the way.
Now, do you think there is a formalized version of what the brothers McKenna did at La Chorrera that exists
I don't think so.
in Tantric Buddhism? Because, like, you've talked to what's his name, the gentleman who wrote The Secret Drugs of Buddhism, Michael Crowley.
Michael Crowley, yeah.
And so, I mean, from that, we can infer that these Tantric Buddhist sects were using psilocybin and amrita, possibly, and then, you know, in conjunction with these acoustically charged settings and the deliberate use of these overtones, were they doing something that maybe, like, does it still blow your mind? And that's why they have meditation retreats. You go and sit in a hermitage for 2 weeks until you stop.
Yeah, well, you know, most of Tibetan Buddhism comes from Bön, which is a 20,000-year-old shamanic society.
Yeah.
B-O with the umlaut.
Correctly, and I'm not pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah. So it's one, you know.
But a lot of it comes via Padmasambhava from Naropa University and these hardcore Buddhist universities that existed in pre-conquest India. And to me, those things were the holdovers of the cultures that existed at Harappa and Mohenjo-daro because of the Shiva seals, you know, the small religious seals. So with showing yoga and stuff like that. So, and Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were obviously the disaster shelters from cities further, you know, lower towards sea level that were flooded at the foot of the Indus Valley, you know, at the end of the Pleistocene, or what we call Noah's flood. Probably these cities were flooded. Survivors went to Harappa and Mohenjo-daro with their these religious seals, and that gave us Buddhism. That type of Buddhism has been destroyed in India with Turkic invasions in 7th to 9th century, and so the only place that it legitimately survives is in Tibet. And so to me, it represents a long technological line that the brothers McKenna couldn't necessarily have tapped into with their musings. Even Pratyekya Buddhas they may be, but they didn't necessarily have the benefit of this long lineage. And now you have had the opportunity in your adventures around the world to go to a lot of these places. Like, what do you feel about so we've talked about plant teachers, we've talked about making the tones themselves. What do you think about the actual setting, you know, the acoustic, whether it's go on, please.
It's very, very important. You can add many tools within this experience, and I've done that in the sound meditation. Sound meditation, you mentioned Nick, the tracks on SoundCloud. I will be soon uploading a lot of stuff. I recorded recently 6 albums. It was a huge project. sounds for meditation. They're not available yet on my website. Someone is still working on the design for the CDs. They will be available for download and on CDs. But if any of the listeners, anyone listening to this podcast and interested in this, can send me an email to my website, and they can buy it from me if they're not there yet.
Great, yeah.
So they're
Link will appear in the
engineered.
notes.
So basically, there are many different things that you can use here. Well, first of all, you need to start with an excellent recording. And overtone emitting instruments are incredibly hard to record. Incredibly hard, because tone color is the hardest thing for microphones to capture. In some cases, we had to use 6 different microphones on one instrument, gongs and bowls and so on. So the setting is important because the acoustical space is important. I also use breathing exercises, visualizations and guided visualizations. And olfactory stimuli, all of these things is to cause an inner stillness and safety and preparedness, and to work on getting the mind out of the way. So these are all important tools, because the knowledge is within us, the divine is within, and these tools would allow us to search and find these things. And this is why all of these tools have been in use for who knows how long. Breathing exercises, dieting, plants, sound, chants, olfactory stimuli, is basically to alter consciousness by changing things on the endogenous chemical level, by introducing new molecules that can change the transducing effect of consciousness, or changing things by exposing the senses to different variables. The auditory, the olfactory, eyesight, and so on.
I think humanity stands on the cusp of a great potential, simply in assimilating a lot of the ideas that you're talking about into just our basic societal ergonomics. You know, we live in these
can I just jump in there for a sec? I was going to say that I think that not only are these things helpful, but they're in the future of our society, they're going to become more necessary as the electromagnetic fields around us and Wi-Fi signals and noise pollution becomes greater and greater. We need these sort of sound meditation to block that sort of things out, to help you get to a state where you can quiet your brain.
Yes.
Sorry.
Absolutely. There's so much noise, we're losing signal.
We're being bombarded constantly now with things around us, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that is fascinating.
Definitely.
Thank you. There's so much that one can say about these things, but you know, we're encoded with the will, with tools, with drive to seek things that would unravel consciousness. No one can stop us. People can get in the way and mislead us, but we always find a way back. And that's basically what we have been doing. And technology is one major element, the internet, to allow us to connect to each other, exchange information. The more we know about things that exist and we didn't know that's out there existing and it's there to be known, the more we have information that can lead us to have knowledge. Knowledge can lead us to have wisdom. And eventually we realize that, it's all inside, it's all inside. And that's how the Buddha realized enlightenment, by just sitting and meditating. Because there's no outside and inside. It's all the same.
Agreed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've gone over a little bit here. Do you have anything more you want to say, or James, do you have anything else to ask?
I've got a couple of last things. Are you doing okay? Do you need to duck out at all, Alexandre?
No, that's okay. Yeah, I can go on for a few minutes.
Okay. Nick, did you go over everything that you had on your? One thing that we might want to talk about, perhaps, is the research. You didn't have time to do a deep dive in it, but that's not very important because I know that you'll already be abreast of what the important issues are. So this gentleman, refresh my memory, Nick, the guy who did the bird sounds?
Okay, just really quick. Joel Sternheimer's work, I believe it was in the 1800s, was how sounds affect protein growth in plants. And certain sound frequencies at certain lengths of time can alter which proteins will grow or not grow within plants. And then this other gentleman, Yannick Van Doorn, has furthered this research to sort of take a quantum mathematical approach, and he's broken down these sounds into specific tones at milliseconds, and he's created these sound files that are these just digital fractal tones of these tones changing.
Like you can play the sound. You can play the sound to a plant, and it will. He's got like 2 or 3 that he's seeking patent on, but one is to eliminate potato blight. Like it's that specific. You play it to potatoes, they excrete the right protein, and it eliminates the potato blight.
Anyway, the impetus of the thing is that when you play them, they actually sound like bird song.
Not kind of like bird sounds, precise.
Pretty much exactly like
bird sounds.
So it's possible that birds are in effect influencing the way plants grow when they come out in the spring, etc.
Wow.
It's very fascinating. I thought you
grow, So yeah, maybe take a peek at that, because what Nick and I were discussing last night is if it works for plants, of course it will work for us on a different level, and what is that doing? How is plant or how is sonic healing, which is sort of a spurious idea, but how does that actually materially translate? Precisely, how does it materially translate to good stuff? Because I remember my grandfather had bad kidney stones, and they used sonic vibration to smash those.
Yes, lithotripsy.
There you go.
Lithotripsy. Yeah,
I mean, using a big hammer to do a small job, but at least we have the tools.
Yes, and we have had them for a while, in pregnancy, for example, the ultrasound. Yeah. And this is the future of medicine. It's sound, but it's not just regular sound. It's high frequency, ultrasound, infrasound. There's so much happening. You can now with ultrasound change the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. It's the most secure barrier in the body. It only lets in a few chemicals. You can thin it out to allow more of the medication that people with ALS, with multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, to receive more of the medication that they take, more than 5%. Because it's so secure, it only lets in about 5%. So now you can thin it out to allow more medication to go in there. You can remove the plaques on the neurons with people with dementia, and you can help them retrieve their memories, basically.
Wow.
Parkinson's disease, also, it's magical stuff, but it's, again, ultrasound. It's high frequencies. So I
to look at the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid for sound.
It's astonishing.
You want to talk on that for a moment?
Yes. Well, the reverberation is astonishing. The way that once you start going around and looking at ancient structures, the most astonishing one is in Malta. It's called the Hypogeum.
I saw it on your video today. You presented to the New York Arts Club or whatever. Yeah,
beautiful.
So the Hypogeum, the oracle chamber, is an acoustical miracle. It's too long to talk about it now, but the Chavin have done this, the Incas, in various places. Everywhere you go, you always find these chambers that were dug out in bedrock, but with an awareness of acoustics. Either places where you can form a standing wave. I mean, it's incredibly complex when you start to get into acoustics.
Complex as it is, do you foresee a time where you could create the Alexandre Tannous Enlightenment for Dummies kit? And it's sort of like, here's a do-it-yourself acoustic chamber. Here are some plant teachers. Here are the things you have to sing.
Wow.
Here are the things you have to think about. Call me in the morning.
Oh, don't call me.
Is that a scientific breakthrough that we could look forward to as a species, or at least as a collective of old freaks?
Well, it's all possible, but people have to be very careful, especially when you use these two powerful tools to hack consciousness. You can go to far places when you just use sound and breathing exercises. And you don't need to add a lot more, because there are a lot of people who just work with sound, but one has to be very careful when combining the two.
As Tanis's experience shows us.
I'm not worried about what we know. I'm worried about what we don't know yet.
Gotcha. You might find an off switch that we didn't know existed.
Yes, especially when you deal with binaural beats, and I don't deal so much with binaural beats. I tend to stick with natural acoustic instruments. I found them to be more powerful, but binaural beats, we need to know more.
Akin to hemisync, hemisphere synchronization? Noted.
So, because, we don't know the brain so well. True. It's the most complex object in the universe. As Dennis calls it, the 3-pound universe.
3-pound universe.
Yeah.
And I mean, the court of Louis XIV was washing their face with mercury. We don't necessarily know if what we're doing today is always going to yield the best results in a long term.
Well, or targeting a specific brainwave state and hammering on it constantly is not necessarily the best thing either. Like, a lot of those things are specifically theta state. Whereas, I guess something like meditation and harmonic overtones would sort of touch through the gamut of the brainwave states and give you a little bit of each, keeping you more mellow and balanced, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, and to learn to navigate in that deep and astonishing space. And you'll find that you can go deeper by learning, as you do it, how to develop the psychonaut skills to work with sound. Because it's not just listening to it the way we know, the way we hear things. It's a lot more complicated than that. I do teach people how to do it when I work with people and facilitating sound meditation, but they need to know a lot. And this is why I always talk for at least half an hour in the beginning of any experience, to up to an hour and a half sometimes. These experiences can last from minimum of an hour and a half to 5 hours. So there's a lot to know, because the magic is what the person does. This is why I don't use the term sound healing. Sound healing, sound healers, these are people don't know how to talk about the experience. It's not the correct term. It expresses neutrality. It does not empower the receiver. It should be an active participation. Sound healing means come and sit down here, and I'm going to heal you just by playing these instruments. You don't need to do anything special. Whatever your mind is doing is fine. No, the magic is what the receiver does.
Yeah, you're healing yourself. The sound is sort of helping you to do that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
But I mean, healing implies dis-ease or imperfection at the first place, and then this is perhaps an enhancement or a retuning yourself to the human baseline that we have the option to, that is our birthright.
Healing can happen from sound, but sound therapy is a safer way, or sound meditation, because really all of these things happen through meditative state. But I don't like these two words back to back, sound healing. It's gimmicky and it's not accurate, and it's disempowering to the individual, to the receiver, and does not address the fact that one needs to know so much on how to listen, how to use sound as a tool. But also there is more than healing that happens. There's revealing too, and sometimes revealing can be healing.
Absolutely. A higher perspective.
Yeah, it could be used for psycho-spiritual experience, to encounter the higher self and the awakened self, for relaxation, for therapy, for healing, revealing, to explore the spirit world. So much can happen. And sound meditation can allow all of these things to fit in it. Sound healing is very specific, that you're definitely going to be healed. I don't know who started this term, but I'm on a mission to change it. God help me. But it's not because it's ridiculous. It's gimmicky. I'm saying this with the interest of the participant.
I think
Yeah.
that Alan Watts summed it up quite well. It's like when you start to engage in Dharma yoga and really addressing your problems, it's not a healing, quite the opposite. Once all of your karmic creditors realize that you're nudging your way toward the door, well, they're going to start they're going to start coming to collect. And it may be a very visceral experience for you as you get all your ducks in a row.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an enigmatic journey.
Well, I've got two last questions.
Okay.
Maybe the penultimate one would be like, do you want to just sum up what your take on what the brothers did at La Chorrera is and how it fits into the larger sort of geography of sound meditation? And then the last question I would have would be something like, if you have a holy grail of sonic understanding or a new scientific paradigm that we're eking towards, what would that kind of look like? So I guess first the La Chorrera question.
Okay. What did they do? Well, they were experimenting with, they were hacking consciousness in the best way, most effective way, clearly, using the two most powerful things, compounds and sound. Now, they did go somewhere, especially Dennis, but I don't know how one can learn about how to navigate. It's going to take many, many journeys. I don't think Dennis would want to go back there again.
That's my impression.
He definitely got somewhere. People who don't know the experience so well, when they listen to it or read it, they'll understand. And he has a more expanded version in his book.
Right, yeah.
Really fantastic.
Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss.
Of the Screaming Abyss, yeah.
If any listeners want to write us a 1-paragraph essay on what all this means to them, they have the possibility of winning a hardback signed version of Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss.
Yes, we got one from Dennis.
Go on, please.
So it's very curious, and I remember when I was exposed to it, read the book and listened to it, I was really, really curious. And that's also how Dennis and I became close friends, because he's interested in my research, because he wants to understand what happened. And but it's I can't really tell you what happened exactly, but something big happened. And I think it does connect to what Tibetan Buddhists with their practices using psychedelics and sound chants also have been doing, because these two tools have served humanity in the best way, in unraveling consciousness. Yeah. And the second question, if there's a holy grail, can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, just, what are you really searching for, seeking? Do you have any exciting predictions about what science is going to do with sound in the future? Yeah, sort of what's your transcendental object at the end of time? To use McKenna quote.
Well, to understand what sound is about, every time you start digging deep into any Eastern philosophy, religions as well, book religions, indigenous beliefs, there's always sound at the end.
Yeah.
In Buddhism, they tell you, in Hinduism, I mean, the universe started with the primordial Om.
Yeah. Or let there be light.
Let there be light, or the Big Bang.
The word made flesh.
In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The concept of logos, Hinduism, Indra's native jewels, the music of the spheres. In ancient Egypt, the universe started with a song. The stairway to heaven in esoteric philosophies, the ladder in shamanism. This is all about sound.
Wow.
It's all about sound. Everyone is talking about the same thing. And I'm trying to figure out, what is it? What is it? Yeah. Akasha, the concept of Akasha in Hinduism too.
The void ether material, Akash, the void.
Yeah. Well, and so this vibratory field that is at the root level of all spiritual, religious experiences, Nada Brahma, the word is vibration, the universe is vibration, the universe is sound.
Yeah.
So what is this about? I'm trying to understand it by really going through direct experiences, by learning about sound, how sound has been used in ceremonies for healing, in trance, in spiritual, religious, holistic, cultural realms, and how shamanic societies have used it. You know, how popular music is, why music is so popular, why it's important for human beings to deal with music. Why do we need music? What does it do to us? How does it heal? We didn't talk about the concept of ethos, which is, you know, how sound can evoke emotions within us. So there's so much stuff to understand, and that's all very important to understand consciousness. So I would predict that sound is going to be a bigger and bigger element. There's already great, huge attention, rising attention to sound, and meditation as well, and sound healing, sound therapy. So we know what we need. We're gravitating, especially in the past 10 years, we have been gravitating so much towards sound, holistic practice, but specifically meditation and sound. They're becoming the new yogas, and hopefully we won't reach the same level of consumerism and ridiculous, you know, spiritual materialism and my, you know, we also, I talk a lot about the danger of working with these powerful tools, the pitfalls, ego inflation. Ego inflation is one of them.
Hinduism calls it the golden chains, right? When you're still attached to the wheel by your ability to be an awesome guru.
Yes, exactly. Spiritual bypassing, is messianic visions. All of these things are very dangerous.
Agreed.
And,
Agreed.
So I would definitely anticipate sound being bigger and more people researching. The problem is that it's so hard to know things about sound. We need to learn
how to tell the shit from the shinola.
Yeah, because you need a multidisciplinary approach, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Terence often says that. We need to look at sound through, you know, in a multidisciplinary way to really understand what it is. And we're a culture of specialists. It's so hard.
Siloed specialists, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, luckily there's people like you who are not only specialists, but are kicking down those boundaries and taking an interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah, it's...
one thing that I experienced... No, sorry, you were about to say? Forgive me.
No, go ahead.
One very odd experience that I experienced when I did the heroic dose was I sort of got into that space where you start having the dialogue with the teacher. And one of the things that it encouraged me to do, it asked me, do you like time traveling? And I said, well, yes, time traveling is wonderful. It said, go and get your recorder. So I went and got not my tape recorder, but my, medieval woodwind instrument here.
Mm-hmm.
Go get your recorder, come up with the name of a very specific title of a song and so, the time, the place, the feeling of the whole event, and then ad-lib that song. Of course, I was in another dimension at this time. I ad-libbed the song. It was a song that I'd never played before, and it would materially manifest the very specific. So I said the tune of the Atlantean captain who had circumnavigated the globe and was coming home with like a hold full of excellent trade materials, and his family was going to be happy to see him. I played this nautical jig and, ended up hurling my recorder across the room because instantly I was imbued with not only this three-dimensional hallucination of what that might look like standing on the poop deck of an Atlantean galley, but like having the satisfaction of the hold full of goods and the family who loves you. And and then a second thing, I said that was ridiculous. It said, do you want to do that again? I said, yeah, sure. And I came up with something about the pyramids and how they were moving the blocks. And it was very acoustically, like maybe they were using acoustics in water to assist with the moving of these things. Maybe it was just hemp ropes and leverage, but, I guess I don't even know what my point is, other than that this phenomenon occurred to me while I was in that heroic dose space, that you can throw up your antenna, declare your intention to try to receive something around that, and then use sound to coax that information through the multiverse into your brain. Who knows?
Yes. Yeah.
And then I guess the last thing is I've noticed a lot of the YouTube videos that you were showing in just the one talk that I had a chance to see today were about sound levitation. Do you want to touch on that briefly as maybe one of our last points?
Yeah, that's a common thing. Sound can levitate objects. So far, we can do it with light objects. But I think it's just a matter of time to figure out how we can levitate heavy objects. And if you know about Ed Leeds Cullen's work.
Yes. Oh, Coral Castle.
Coral Castle. So some people think that he was using sound to bypass gravity, to move things. And he said that he discovered the secret of the ancient Egyptians.
So are you a Tellinger fan, Michael Tellinger at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Bell Stones and the civilizations of Southern Africa, they seem to have been using that stuff incredibly.
This happens everywhere in the world. This is why I take sound very seriously, and I think, without being biased, but again, this is something that we see all around us. Sound is it. Sound is, and even Nikola Tesla said that if you want to understand the universe, you have to think in terms of vibration, frequencies, and energy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's always good to have a copy of this book at your disposal as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, those are all of the that you've answered with ringing excellence all of the things that I wanted to hear. Do you have anything else, Nick?
No, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
You're welcome.
How about you, James?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup, merci infiniment, Monsieur Tannous. Et j'espère que nous pouvons faire ceci une autre fois, peut-être.
Oui, avec plaisir.
Excellent.
Okay.
Merci infiniment.
Okay.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Dennis rose up in his hammock then. The candle went out, and he sounded his first howl of hypercarbolation. It was mechanical and loud, like a bull roar, and ended with a convulsive spasm that traveled throughout his body and landed him out of his hammock on the floor.
Well, that's our show. A big thanks to Dr. Dennis McKenna and Mr. Tanis for coming out. We could go on for hours more. This is all fascinating stuff, but we'll leave you with this simple message.
The message being, we can't promise you that we've left you any more enlightened, knowledgeable, worldly. We can't even promise that we've left you any less confused. But we can promise you we haven't left you any dumber. So, thanks a lot for watching. We love you.